of those different victims. First, let's take a look at what was called the T4 program, which was the euthanasia program, as the Nazis referred to it. T4 simply means the address at which it took place. And this was their program to sterilize the undesirables, to put them to death. In order to prevent the undesirable segment of the population from increasing, the law for the prevention of progeny with hereditary diseases was actually passed by the Nazis in the year 1933. This legislated sterilization for all persons who suffered from diseases such as mental illness, retardation, physical deformity, epilepsy, blindness, deafness, severe alcoholism. It explained the need for such a law to keep certain people from having more children. And, quote, "It is not only the decline in population which is a cause for serious concern, but equally the increasingly evident genetic composition of our people. Countless numbers of inferiors and those suffering from hereditary conditions are reproducing unrestrainedly, while their sick and asocial offspring burden our community." The forced sterilization program began in January of 1934. Eventually, it was estimated that between 300 and 400,000 people would be euthanized or sterilized through this program. Most of the victims were patients in mental hospitals or other types of medical institutions. The Nazi government used the public health services to help it carry out its, quote, racial hygiene program. People living in asylums and mental institutions were considered to be an economic burden on the community, on the civilization, the Nazis said. They were lives that were not worth living, to quote the Nazis. With the beginning of World War II, the Nazis began the systematic seizure and the systematic murder of the inmates of the asylums, nursing homes, and mental institutions. Many of these people were murdered as part of the Nazi euthanasia program, which is known as T4. The program was authorized in a letter actually signed by Adolf Hitler in October of 1939. Euthanasia facilities were set up in various places in Germany. These considered by the Nazis to be unfit for work or incurably diseased were murdered in these places. The T4 program continued throughout the war and did not stop until after the war was completely over. A propaganda effort was launched to convince the German people of the necessity of eliminating the undesirables from the general population. Several hospitals were set up to carry out the euthanasia program. 6 especially established gas chamber sites were the main killing centers. There was a place called Grafenich, where they murdered 9,839 victims. Brandenburg upon Havel, 9,772. Bernburg, 8,601. Hadamar, which was a very well-known one, murdered 10,072 people. Hortheim, near the city of Linz, executed or euthanized 18,269, and Sonestein, near the city of Pirna, murdered 13,270. False information and forged death certificates were then sent to the families of these victims, stating that their beloved one had died of a natural cause. On request, the family received the alleged ashes of their deceased next of kin. And by the end of these gas killings, in August of 1941, more than 70,000 people had been murdered in the gas chambers. In 1942, the gas extermination institutions were converted to asylums and were used to kill inmates of the concentration camps. The bulk of the T4 staff moved to the concentration camps in Poland. They were there involved in the extermination of the European Jewry. So up until that point, they were euthanizing their own people. In Germany, the T4 euthanasia murders expanded throughout the Reich. In many institutions, patients were killed with overdoses
of medications administered by doctors sworn to heal. Overdoses of medication administered by physicians and nurses. Others were just starved to death. Not even ill or retarded children could escape the killing process. In a special kinder ward, infant ward, between 1939 and 1945, some 5,000 babies and little children were poisoned by the Nazis. The most infamous of these killing centers was Hadamar. Victims were transported here from all over Western Germany, and of the 4,817 patients received from within the borders of the Third Reich, prior to 1945, 4,422 died of, quote, unnatural causes. During the day, the Institute's physicians selected the weak, the ill, or the rebellious patients to be put to death at night, and nurses and guardians carried out the order. The bodies of the murdered were buried then in mass graves. Starting in 1943, half-Jewish asylum inmates, soldiers suffering from psychiatric problems, and tuberculosis laborers and their children were added to the Hadamar list of victims. The murder of the handicapped preceded the murder of the Jews and the Gypsies. It is therefore reasonable to conclude that the T4's killing operation served as a model for the final solution to the Jewish problem. The success of the euthanasia policy convinced the Nazi leadership that mass murder was indeed technically feasible, that ordinary men and women were willing to help kill large numbers of innocent human beings, and that the bureaucracy would cooperate in such an unprecedented enterprise. We're going to stop there, because in our next lecture we'll take a look at some of the other